Ah! Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind, and this is another set taking place during the Mocktom event leading up to 7.5, and we have some decent variety once again, although no extremes this time. That being said, for Duty 1 we went to the third trial of Dawntrail, so hop to this timestamp to skip it if you're afraid of spoilers. With that out of the way, we of course went to Interphos as Viper. We start off very nicely, and then in the wind phase, one of our tanks dropped due to the circular knockback. I have two tips for that one. The first tip is that you can knockback immune that, and you won't need it for anything else really, so that's a very safe solution. Alternatively, as the knockback is like half of the total length across, standing a bit further away from the center of the knockback makes it a lot easier to aim it correctly. We actually amazingly see not a single death in the earth phase with the walls, and so we move on to absolute authority. The flare markers do nothing, we safely bunch up for the friendship Doritos, then 2 DPS die, overlapping with the acceleration bombs resolving. And right at the end, a tank goes down as well. Really, random aside on that, it looks like the gaze mechanic applies like a 1 second petrify that doesn't really do anything anyway? Or does it make the circle AoEs around the place one-shot? Either way, with this many deaths, it is entirely beneficial to just send a healer limit break. It's also pretty funny how the boss just cancels mid-mechanic because we hit the phase transition threshold. And indeed, the rest of the fight is already a victory. For Duty 2, we went to Wanderer's Palace as Paladin. At the start of the duty, I normally do one big pull all the way to the door, but I may have missed a mob or two this time, which led my healer to take a lot of damage they shouldn't be taking. To fix that, I stopped the pull early, used cover on the healer and hallowed ground for myself to safely and decisively stabilize. Later, in the big room with the Nimian devices, things get a bit awkward as they tend to do. I pull up near the device at the exit and position myself to try and draw the attention of the big Tonberry, but it seemed like after one player tried the device and got denied once, they didn't try again. So I sort of stood there baiting them up for nothing. So we ran over to the further away device and then got things resolved before it got dangerous. On the last boss, our samurai seemed to possibly have been a first timer as I instructed them to focus the boss. Normally, it would probably make sense to deal with the ads, especially when they ominously trudge towards you like this, but specifically on this boss, the ads don't do that much damage, if they even get to attack at all. But killing them boosts an attack from the boss, an attack that, as I recall, is a no warning tank buster. So this means wasting time attacking the ads means there's more time for the boss to reach that mechanic, but you're also buffing it. And yes, the king can sometimes just one-shot a tank with it if you do it like this. For Duty 3, we went to M4N, Arcadion's Wicked Thunder, as Pictomancer. During the 4 cannon blasts, I miscalculate my plan and end up casting Thunder and Magenta when I should be dodging. Other options also include I could have used Comet in Black or started the Hammer combo, although both of these options would jank out the burst very slightly. Still, better to cast something than nothing. As a result of me needing to recover from that, I end up positioning my garden a bit weirdly, and unfortunately, the stack marker decided to not come close enough, so I stood as close as I could, giving moral support. Wicked Thunder's last mechanic is her first wing phase, after which she switches to the desperation phase, and in retrospect, I would probably have gotten more value out of skipping drawing a hammer, and possibly maybe even also skipping a living motif, probably also a starry motif, as all three barely even fit at all before the fight ended. Duty 4 is about not putting out the fires as Gunbreaker. Remember, everything must die, so AoE spam as the tank is usually optimal. And for Duty 5, we're revisiting the Queen of Sleep casts, and this time I managed to stun one, interrupt another, and the third decided to sleep me, which of course means an auto attack clears it, and we're done real fast. For Duty 6, we went to Zurvan as Dancer. We actually have a death on Zor too, probably due to an unfortunate overlap. Aside from that, the duty goes pretty nice and calm. Something funny about the ad intermission is the execrated wits that cast Meteor. I don't know how much damage these deal on normal, but I'm not joking, the few times I've landed here on extreme, these sneaky guys just casting a spell quietly in the corner has messed up too many pulls. For duty 7, we went to Underkeep as Black Mage, and it seems like both our tank and healer were quite shocked to see me here. Hello there! However, it is just good old Underkeep, so not that much happened. On the final boss, near the end of the fight, I had this galaxy brain moment where I positioned myself at a spot that would be safe for the rest of the fight, only to, for some reason, jump out of it early and then get hit. But hey, survived and we still won. For duty 8, we went to P9N, Pandæmonium's Kokytos, as Machinist. Considering how rare this duty is these days, let's take a look at some of the more unique mechanics in the fight. The Mage's Lament has this mechanic of an ice donut and fire spread markers, and she randomly expands one of them. Most of the time, she does one, then the other. That said, when she combines the two elements, a consistent way to position for it is to have one fire spread at 3 different relative cardinal positions, and the rest of the party in the 4th one. This works regardless of whether the boss expands with fire or shrinks with ice. Unless of course you accidentally touch both simultaneously. It shouldn't kill you. For the Martialist's Lament, remember, don't cross the streams. The stacks apply a Vuln, that means taking both kills you. The other distinct mechanic on this guy is the front-rear combination, with front being a circle plus a front cleave, and rear being a donut and a back cleave. There isn't much to say here other than remember to actually read what the boss is doing. For the Beast's Lament, I think the only mechanic worth highlighting is Charybdis. The initial spreads are persistent AoEs, so placing them super inconveniently can cause problems for the immediately following mechanics. That said, the double tank buster seemingly was completely ignored by both tanks, and they barely survived it. And then 3 players didn't get that the cracked comets won't work against Ecliptic Meteor. Thankfully, we had a red mage, so we recovered. Only for the donut and spreads during the next mage phase to kill both healers again. But again, thanks to red mage magic, we recover and clear the fight. For duty 9, we went to Shiva hard as Monk. Not that much happened here, but a funny detail about Monk on this fight at this level is that perfect balance isn't worth using on single target, but is very worth using on AoE, so having both charges for the add phase is quite nice. For duty 10, we went to Meso Terminal as Reaper. Again! It's actually really weird how frequently this happens now, so I guess remember to use Harvest Moon at least once per pull to optimize it? With that said, let's jump to the second boss, because once again, stuff happened. Now, things actually went perfectly fine for the first large part of the fight, but you know, let me know if this one sounds familiar. Serial torture begins. The healer gets 1-2 punched by flail into line AoE and dies. I and the summoner also almost died to a line AoE at the same time. So I hit every healing option I have, try to stabilize, turn around and Phoenix down the healer. And I barely survived the raid wipe that happened simultaneously. Then finish off my boss and promptly go to help with the healer boss, and we stabilize from there. The rest of the duty went pretty normally. Feels very similar to what happened last week. For duty 11, we went to A10N, Lamebrix Strikebocks, as Summoner. Some might even call him the proto-coffee maker these days. A funny detail about this fight are the 3 trap buttons in the center line of the arena. Stepping on one of them while they are blinking activates a mechanic, which can lock everyone in place, do line AoEs on the outer lines of the arena, or drop flails through the center line of the arena. What is funny about these buttons is that if you don't step on any of them for an extended period, then the boss will forcibly stamp one of them to activate a mechanic anyway. I don't know if it is random or if he has a predictable sequence, but the key is that if you don't choose aggressively, then eventually he will choose for you. And sometimes he will do the worst one for a specific moment. It is of course possible it's just memeing, but it's also possible this is the real reason why some players just keep stomping on the flail button when I get this duty. For duty 12, we went to Ghost Park as Samurai as an instant replacement for some reason. 2026 leave on site Ghost Park apparently. Anyway, it has been a bit since we got this one, so I do have tips for the first and second boss that might be useful to repeat. On Leonog, the first boss, the way the dashing kits work is that each kit at the edge of the arena will dash at the furthest away player on their dash out. And when they hit the edge of the arena, they turn around and dash at the closest player. This means that with a ranged and a healer standing at opposing ends and the rest of the party standing under the boss, all of the kits become completely predictable. This exact tactic works just like this for the first and second waves of kits. The third wave, if you ever come to that, mixes things up and will dash at closest first. For the second boss, it might be a bit surprising to see me frequently dodge the teacups without even as much as glancing at them after they initially spawn. The reason for this is that while you could try and track the teacups as they spin around, this is often almost more confusing, so instead, memorizing patterns often helps more. For the symmetrical patterns, going to where the ghosts started, roughly, works very effectively. However, this does not work for the asymmetric patterns. When the ghosts are 90 degrees apart, the safe spot is 90 degrees further clockwise around their starting position. When they are 90 degrees apart but one is on the inner circle, just go to the opposite side of the arena entirely. And if they are on a straight line but opposite circles, you go towards the furthest out ghost. A lot of stuff to keep in mind. I'm pretty sure that among these weirder patterns, only the 90 degrees apart one can appear on the second wave, and usually the boss is dead before you have to deal with the third wave. For Duty 13, we went to Stone Vigil as Warrior, a classic. I like to split up the big AoE pulls in at least 2 to make things easier, but with that said, you can pull everything into the boss room and pull the boss to spawn the checkpoint, which strangely makes things both safer and more dangerous. You will much more likely wipe, but even if you do, you can just use the checkpoint to skip the packs and try the boss directly. I just find it boring to do that, so I don't. On a slightly different note, throughout this duty, it looked like our healer wasn't attacking due to not showing any casts. In truth, they were spamming Ruin 2 instead of Ruin 1, which kinda makes sense. That said, if you are auto-attacking while casting, it might make sense to use Ruin 2 to get slightly more auto-attacks in than Ruin 1, but the actual difference is small enough that Ruin 1 still wins out. Sometimes without even accounting for the auto-attacks it might still get, which makes Ruin 1 slightly better at this level. But imagine if I actually corrected a healer over such an incredibly innocuous difference. The duty actually went super well, so I had nothing to complain about. For Duty 14, we went and bothered some Void Scent. Remember, the boss is stunnable, so if you pick your moment smartly, you can get a lot more reliable uptime to finish the fight faster. For Duty 15, we are an instant replacement on M8N, Arcadion's Howling Blade, as Red Mage. Considering how badly I've seen this fight go in the past, this actually went quite alright. At the first Beacon Moonlight, both a tank and a healer dies. During the ad phase, the monk dies. The first pillar phase drops both healers and summoner. A moment where, had I been any other job, this might have just been a wipe. Right as everyone gets back up, a healer dies again to the following raid wide. Then we stay stable for a while, and then Shadow Chase takes out a tank, and the Beacon Moonlight as we close out the fight takes me out. I misread which clone would dash first, and of course completely tripped up when I realized. But despite everything, we made it through. And finally for Duty 16, we went to Dusk Vigil as Scholar. This is one of the duties that got shined up with the recent patch, so just for some historical stuff perhaps, let me go over the bosses in slightly more detail than I normally would. The first boss regularly swipes with no warning mini-busters, but at certain thresholds will stun a semi-random player for 10 seconds, then suck them in with a cone that stuns them for a fresh new 10 seconds, and then punt them replacing the stuns with a 5-second stun, stunning for a combined roughly 15 seconds or so. As these are sort of HP threshold based, if the boss is damaged fast enough, it can chain the stuns, and it can, and often will, choose the same person again and again. On the second threshold, it instead stuns for about 5 seconds or so, finishing with a line AoE that is actually a line stack. On the third threshold, it does the full combo of stun, suck-in stun, knockback stun, and then line stack. The boss can also do a circle AoE, but this rarely makes much of a splash. Be sure to let me know if the whole stun lock sequence is reworked with the new version. The second boss has a raid wide and a donut AoE, and otherwise mostly just spawns ads that buff it by casting Rictus. As a result, the fight becomes a bit of a DPS race a lot of the time. The final boss has an overarching gimmick of piles of rubble. This rubble can be destroyed by certain mechanics like a stomp AoE on a random player, a lion AoE on a random player, or the tank busters if the tank is too close to rubble when it happens. But usually, more rubble spawns in as needed. The rubble is actually needed to avoid two other mechanics. The first, main one, is Whirling Jail, which sucks you in and stuns you if you don't have rubble between you and the center jail. The other mechanic is Winds of Winter, which is an attack originating from the boss, and if you don't have rubble between you and the boss, it hurts and builds a debuff that makes its wind attacks hurt more. But that is essentially it. As was probably not very surprising, this group did very well, but do let me know if you noticed any changes to Dusk Vigil with 7.5. Yet another set with some decent variety, and this time we actually passed 3/4 on the achievement, so we have less than 500 duties remaining. Quite crazy to look back on considering we started Dawntrail with only 200 duties cleared. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi, links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, Kokytos, P9N, is the first time in Final Fantasy XIV that a first turn boss of any raid tier had spoken voice lines. P10N, Pandæmonium, was equally the first time a second turn had spoken lines. E11, Fatebreaker of Shadowbringers, and E8, Eden Shiva, were the first times a third and fourth turn had spoken voice lines.